So hi everyone, it's me again. Today I picked number 15. I do not go consecutively on the piece because it's been some time since I played the Czerny again. Actually, since my last video recording, I haven't been playing for a while because I've been really busy sourcing for surgical masks. So I think I just want to have a fresh start and maybe just pick randomly on a piece. This happens to be a piece of my style, I think, because of its agility. It's fast, but it's not furious. It's simply agile, and it should be lively and spirited and light. So yeah, so this piece is really obvious. It's an etude on basically the right hand on running notes, especially on partly chromatic patterns. It's a 4-note patterns with 4, 1, 2, 3 fingering. So in this short video, I want to explore about how do we practice the 4, 1, 2, 3 pattern. The other thing I want to discuss is how to notice the left hand. It seems to be simple because it just have some really straightforward chords, but to take notice of that is also an important aspect of this piece. And lastly, I want to talk about how to sustain the tempo. So let's first start with the chromatic patterns. That is the 4, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Basically, it has either a pattern without repeated notes, like this one, or a pattern with some repeated notes. So here we have a repeated note. So I think the biggest challenge for this piece is maybe to sustain the speed, but also at the same time to make sure the repeated notes are heard clearly. And to do so, we have to, or actually it's by my opinion, to use a little hand gesture to make sure that these two notes can separate from each other. So if we just fix on the note and we apply too much pressure on it, then we cannot get out of the first note in time and to get in the second note. So we have to be really responsive to the key strike when we practice this. So maybe as a starter, you can try to make sure, say now I'm in bar 1 and I'm in the second beat where we have these 4 notes. So G, 2 Gs and A and B. So what we can do is to practice really slowly, but our brain keeps really alive on feeling how your 4th finger can escape from the note as quickly as possible. So the first note is on the G with a 4th finger. So this one, after you strike it, you have to like kick things out. So you have to be like magic, whoosh, and then you go away. So of course you don't just touch the surface of the key. You have to strike in. So it's a balance on how you just strike just right at the bottom of the keypad without going too much extra into the keypad. You just right on the spot, the hammer in the piano, just right on the spot, strike on the string, and then that's it, you go right away. So it's a very subtle feeling, and you have to feel how do you kick it really easily. So you see I have this kind of gesture, and I find it very handy when I want to yeah, so you see this gesture will help you to guide the thumb from the fourth finger, you kick, and then there you go. The thumb just goes naturally into the position. So in a way, you don't just think of the fingering position, but you think of the hand gesture as a whole in one move, in one action, but not two actions. That will slow down the whole thing, and it will make the thinking more complicated. Yeah, so when you practice this, I think you can try what is this? Oh yeah, this one is the okay. Etc. This is not in the right mood. Or maybe this will be better, but we have 3 notes here. Yeah, etc. So you can find some scales or some patterns as long as you can practice this kind of yeah, spontaneous action. I think that will help you to find this like a pluck. Yeah, it's a very fast pluck. So I find this handy when I play this kind of pieces. Yeah, so this is basically on the right hand, and basically we have, yeah, for the repeated patterns. And then for the non-repeated patterns, like on the 4th bar, we have a lot of this kind of thing. So it's basically just 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, etc. So just use your wrist to rotate. That would do the whole thing. And of course you have to have your finger work, which is kind of my weakness, but yeah, but you can use the wrist to guide the fingers to do its own independent work. So if we go really exaggeratedly, I think it will be like that. So from left to right, left to right, left to right, left to right, left to right. And you'll find the good thing is when you go from the left to right, you have to have an initiation. So the first note will automatically be accented. So the rest of the thing is to adjust the balance so that everything sounds just right. If you don't do the balance, then you will be something like, of course, this will not sound good. Or if you don't have independent fingers enough, then of course, also not good. So you have to strike a balance between accenting things and depending on the wrist. Don't depend too much on the wrist motion, but also maintain your independent fingers. And don't just depend on the strike with the wrist, but also you need to make sure that you control the power very well. Yeah, so that's the right hand. So here's comes the left hand. It sounds really simple. Right? It's really simple. It's just like an orchestra where it's just a cello in the classical period. You just don't do anything. You just just strike the really, yeah, the most boring notes ever. But I want to emphasize on the importance of the left hand as well, because if you don't pay attention to it, then sometimes you may have weird sounding accents, like, or you play the wrong note if you don't pay enough attention, or no sound. See, it's not beautiful, so you have to make sure you still shape this little phrasing well, even it's so simple. And I think that sometimes that's what makes it hard, because it's so simple that you will just miss the detail. Yeah. And then we also have long notes, like in bar 25. And then we suddenly have very short notes. And then we have a ballad. I think it's just important to emphasize the long, like triumphant, trumpet-like long notes versus the really childish sounding, like, bass. So you can think about that as well if you practice this piece. Yeah, and then lastly, on the sustaining part, how do you sustain the tempo so fast? Well, I find it I find that I have to adjust my gesture, my body gesture, in order to make sure that the two hands do not have any pressure at all when they do their work. So if we play like this, you see my body starts collapsing. Of course, no one's collapsed this, obviously, but if you keep collapsing, then your hands will just feel heavy and they cannot sustain their speed. So I think that's the only or the most important point I find. So you have to keep making sure that your body is held upright, so that when you play, you can always keep the floatiness. So I will find that my hands don't have any weight. I can, even if I move a lot, I'm still fine. Yeah, even I move a lot of my elbows, it's still fine, because I can make sure that my fingers and any parts in front of my wrist are securely stuck with the keyboard, but without applying extra pressure. So it's really important that your body is held upright so as not to apply the extra pressure downward into the keyboard. Then the fingers can have their, like, without burden, they can just do whatever they need to do. Yeah, so that's all from me. Yeah, okay, bye-bye.